Day 127 aboard the International Space Station. 3:14 in the morning. Engineer Marcus Cole reached into a routine maintenance housing to replace a filter that was 6 days old. What he pulled out had 40 years of corrosion on it. He stared at it for a long time. Then he called his crewmates. Within 4 hours, mission control had gone silent. Within 14 hours, an unregistered vehicle had docked at the station. Within 24 hours, all 3 astronauts were back on Earth, separated, debriefed alone for 9 hours each. No one asked them about the filter, not once. That was 11 years ago. This is what they found. Before we go any further, if you've never seen this channel before, welcome. We tell the stories that don't make it into the headlines. If that's the kind of story you want more of, hit subscribe right now. It's free. And leave a like on this video. Let's talk about what was in Module 7. There are things that happen in space that never make it into the press releases. Not because they are unimportant. Because they are too important. Because the people who manage the flow of information between what happens above the atmosphere and what the public is told happens above the atmosphere have made a calculation, and the calculation is that some information requires more preparation than the current moment allows. This is not cynicism. It is, in its own way, a form of care. The question is only whether the care is for the public or for the institution, and that question does not always have a clean answer. What follows is the account of 3 NASA astronauts, their 127th day aboard the International Space Station, and the 4 days that followed it. It is drawn from 1 recorded interview, 1 set of photographs, 1 sealed envelope opened 11 years after it was sealed, and a corroded filter sitting in a glass case on a shelf in a workshop in rural Montana. None of it has been officially explained. All of it happened. Engineer Marcus Cole had been aboard the International Space Station for 127 days when he reached into the atmospheric processor housing in Module 7 at 3:14 in the morning, station time, to replace a filter that had been installed 6 days earlier and had an expected operational life of 180 days. He was not expecting to find anything unusual. Filter replacements are among the most routine maintenance tasks on the station, performed on a schedule so regular and so well understood that the procedure requires almost no conscious attention from the engineer performing it. Marcus had replaced hundreds of filters over the course of his career. His hands knew the procedure, his mind was elsewhere. Then his hands stopped, and his mind came back. The filter he was holding was corroded. Not dirty, not clogged, not worn in the normal way that filters wear from use. Corroded. A deep uniform corrosion covering every surface of the object. The kind of corrosion that materials scientists associate with decades of exposure, not days. He turned it over. He ran his thumb along the edge and the material crumbled slightly. He reached into the housing and ran his finger along the interior and pulled back a residue that had no business being there. He sat in the maintenance corridor for a moment, holding the filter, thinking. Then he took out his tablet and photographed everything and reached for his comm. Dr. Yuki Tanaka had been awake for 6 hours before Marcus called her. She had been sitting at her science station in the research module, looking at a graph on her screen that she had been looking at, in various forms and through various analytical frameworks, for all 6 of those hours. The graph showed atmospheric composition readings from the past 72 hours. At normal scale, the readings were flat and stable, exactly what a properly functioning life support system produces. But Yuki had isolated a single variable and enlarged it, and in the enlargement a pattern was visible. A cyclical variation repeating every 4 hours and 17 minutes with a precision that natural fluctuation does not produce and equipment drift does not produce. a pattern with structure, a pattern that wanted to be noticed. She had run it through 3 separate analysis algorithms. All 3 returned the same conclusion. The variation was real, it was consistent, and it did not correspond to anything in the station's operational database. She had not yet reported it. She was not yet certain what she had. She was a scientist, and scientists do not report things they cannot characterize, and she could not yet characterize this. She was still looking at it, turning it over in her mind the way Marcus was turning the filter over in his hands, when her comm crackled and Marcus's voice came through, and he described what he had found, and she said 2 words. "Come here." Commander David Reyes had been in space 3 times before this mission. He was not a man who came to conclusions quickly or expressed alarm easily, both qualities that NASA looks for in the people it puts in command of its most expensive real estate. He had developed over the course of a long career the particular kind of equilibrium that belongs to people who have learned to hold uncertainty without resolving it prematurely. He was good at not knowing things yet. He was good at waiting. He looked at Yuki's atmospheric variation graph. He looked at Marcus's corroded filter. He looked at his crew. He was running something in his expression, some internal calculation that his face only partially showed. Then he moved to the communication station and composed a report that described both anomalies accurately and without editorial interpretation, and transmitted it to Mission Control at 4:22 in the morning. The response took 4 minutes and 11 seconds. The standard response time for crew-initiated communications from the ISS is under 90 seconds. Reyes noted the delay. He noted the fact that the response was 6 words long. "Do not touch anything. Stand by." He showed it to Yuki and Marcus. Neither of them said anything. For the next 6 hours, Mission Control said nothing further. Not a follow-up question, not a request for additional data, not an acknowledgement that the report had been reviewed or that action was being taken, or that someone somewhere was doing anything at all with the information that 3 people living in a metal cylinder 400 kilometers above the Earth had just sent down the wire. Just silence, and the instruction to stand by, and the station's ambient hum, and the 90-minute cycles of daylight and darkness as the planet turned below. Reyes sat at the communication panel and did not run diagnostics. He sat and looked at the panel that was not receiving anything and thought about what the silence meant. He had been in enough institutional situations to know that silence from authority is never actually silence. Silence is a form of communication. Silence says, "We received your information. We are making decisions about it. We are not yet ready to tell you what those decisions are. Please remain where you are and do not do anything that would complicate the decisions we are making." At 10:38, a voice came through the communication system that none of the 3 crew members had heard before. It was calm, measured, the voice of someone who had delivered this kind of communication many times and had developed a register for it. Authoritative without hierarchy, informative without explanation, a voice that said, "I am telling you what you need to know, and only what you need to know." The voice gave no name, no title, no organizational identification. It told them the following: a resupply vehicle would arrive in 14 hours. They were to prepare their non-essential personal items for transfer. They were not to conduct any further analysis of the anomalies they had reported. They were not to discuss those anomalies on any recorded channel. They were to consider themselves on evacuation standby, effective immediately. Then the channel closed. The 3 of them stood together at the communication station in the silence that followed, and the silence had a different quality now than the institutional silence of the previous 6 hours. This silence was theirs, and in it something was understood between them that did not need to be said and was not said and was understood completely. Marcus picked up the corroded filter. He looked at Reyes. Reyes shook his head once. Marcus put the filter in his personal equipment bag. Yuki requested permission to use the external camera array at 1204. Mission Control approved the request in 40 seconds, which was faster than usual, which Yuki noted. She navigated the external cameras along the length of the station, module by module, until she reached Module 7. The corrosion that Marcus had found on the interior filter was present on the exterior hull of Module 7. But on the exterior it was not uniform. It formed a pattern with geometry, with regular intervals, with repeating forms that had structure at every scale she could achieve with the camera's zoom. She increased the magnification. The pattern held its structure at higher resolution. She increased it further. Still the pattern, more detailed now, more complex in its inner workings but consistent with its larger form. The way natural structures are consistent across scales. The way a coastline looks like a coastline whether you are looking at it from 10,000 meters or 1,000 meters or 100. She photographed it with her personal camera, the small handheld device she had brought aboard as part of her personal allowance. Not connected to the station's recording systems, not logged, not archived, not transmitted. She folded the photographs and put them in a personal document folder. She did not call the others. She sat alone with what she was looking at for a while longer. Then she went back to her station and continued her atmospheric analysis and did not add anything new to the official record. The 14 hours before the evacuation vehicle arrived were two things at once. They were the orderly, documented preparation of a crew following correct evacuation protocol, the filing of handover reports, the packing of personal items, the pre-departure systems checks, all of it done correctly and completely and in full accordance with every procedure in the manual. And they were something else that was not in the manual and was not documented and was not transmitted and was happening in the spaces between the official activity. Yuki printing her photographs. Marcus sealing the corroded filter in a personal medical supply container along with samples he quietly collected from 3 other modules, wanting to know whether the corrosion was isolated to Module 7 or whether it had spread to adjacent systems. Reyes alone in the command module with a notebook and a pen writing everything down in his own handwriting because handwriting is not recorded and not transmitted and belongs to the person who produces it. The vehicle that arrived was not in any public NASA vehicle registry. Its markings were minimal. It docked at Module 3, which was not the standard docking port, and the crew watched it through the viewport as it completed its approach with the careful attention of people looking at something they want to understand and know they will not be given the time to fully understand. 2 people came aboard, flight suits with no identifying patches beyond a small geometric symbol on the left shoulder that none of the 3 crew members recognized. They carried equipment cases. They did not give their names. One of them handed Reyes a document to sign, which he read carefully and signed, and the other one went directly to Module 7 without asking for directions and without speaking to the crew. And the first one followed, and the hatch of Module 7 closed behind them. They were in Module 7 for 3 hours and 12 minutes. The sounds that came from Module 7 during that time were the sounds of methodical professional work, equipment being operated, recordings being made, occasional extended silence. The crew sat in the main module and did not speak to each other because there was nothing useful to say, and everything they might have said was better held than spoken in a place where speaking was recorded. At one point, Marcus got up and walked to the hatch of Module 7. He stood in front of it. He could hear work on the other side. He stood there for perhaps 40 seconds. Then he turned around and came back. He sat down. He did not explain himself. No explanation was needed. When the two unnamed personnel exited Module 7 3 hours and 12 minutes later, their equipment cases were heavier. The way they held them was different from the way they had carried them in. They walked directly to the docking port. One of them stopped at the airlock and turned back and looked at the three crew members. He held the look for 3 seconds. Then he went through the airlock and the hatch closed and the docking clamps released and the vehicle moved away from the station and was gone. A secondary lock had been installed on the hatch of Module 7 while the personnel were inside. The mechanism had a keypad. None of the three crew members had the code. Reyes did the final pre-departure walkthrough of the station alone. He moved through each module methodically, performing the checks, securing the systems, doing the work correctly because doing the work correctly was what the station required and what his crew required and what his own sense of professional identity required regardless of the circumstances. At the end of the walkthrough, he stood at the junction of the main corridor and looked down the length of the station one more time. The sealed hatch of Module 7 at the far end, the keypad glowing faintly on the lock. He turned around and boarded the return vehicle. They said nothing on any recorded channel during the descent. Standard radio protocol maintained exactly. Every check-in response correct. Nothing beyond what was asked, nothing withheld from what was required. The discipline of people who understand the difference between the recorded and the unrecorded and conduct themselves accordingly in each. They landed at 6:44 local time. Within minutes they were separated. 3 vehicles, 3 directions, no explanation. Reyes watched Yuki being guided into a different vehicle across the landing site and caught 1 second of eye contact with Marcus before the doors closed. Each of them was debriefed separately for 9 hours. The questions were identical in sequence. None of them mentioned the filter. None of them mentioned the atmospheric variation. None of them mentioned the pattern on Module 7's exterior, or the unnamed personnel, or the equipment cases, or the secondary lock, or the vehicle that was not in any registry. At the end of each debrief, the interviewer asked the standard closing question. Is there anything else you would like to add? Each of them said no. They did not contact each other in the 11 years that followed. They maintained their clearances. They continued their careers. They did not speak publicly. The ISS continued its operations. New crews launched and returned. Module 7 appeared in all public documentation as fully operational. No crew member was assigned to work in Module 7. The corroded filter sat in a glass case on a shelf in Marcus Cole's workshop. He had it tested by 3 independent materials scientists over the course of those 11 years. All 3 gave the same assessment. The corrosion pattern was consistent with approximately 40 years of exposure. The filter had been 6 days old. 11 years after the evacuation, an independent aerospace journalist published an analysis based on 4 years of Freedom of Information requests. She had obtained maintenance logs with date ranges missing, vehicle registry entries with identification fields blank, communication transcripts with exchanges removed. She had laid all the gaps out and looked at their shape, and the shape of the gaps was consistent and specific and pointed to a single 4-day period and a single module designation. The article spread. David Reyes retired from NASA 6 weeks after the article was published. 3 months later, he gave one interview. He sat in a chair in a simply lit room and spoke for a long time about what he had observed on day 127 and the 4 days that followed. He described everything. He held the sealed envelope in his hands throughout. The envelope he had prepared in the hours before evacuation, written by hand in a notebook, sealed before they boarded the return vehicle. He opened it at the end of the interview. He held up the page inside. He showed that it existed, that the record was contemporaneous, that he had written it then and kept it and not changed a word. He said, "I do not know what was in Module 7. I know what I observed. I know how the institution responded to what I observed. I know that the response was not proportionate to the official explanation of a technical anomaly. A technical anomaly does not require unnamed personnel and unregistered vehicles and sealed hatches and 9-hour separate debriefs and 11 years of silence." He paused for a long time. He said, "I have also spent 11 years considering the possibility that whatever they found required exactly that response. That the calculation made by the people who managed the information was made for reasons that were not solely self-protective. That some information genuinely requires more preparation than the current moment allows." He paused again. He said, "I still do not know which of those things is true. I know what I observed. I am telling you what I observed. What it means is a question I cannot answer. I am not sure anyone can answer it yet. I am not sure the answer would be comfortable." He put the page back in the envelope. Dr. Yuki Tanaka never gave an interview. She sent one package to the journalist who had published the analysis. It contained her photographs, clear images of Module 7's exterior surface. The pattern in the corrosion, the geometry of it, the structure that persisted at every level of magnification, and the atmospheric variation graph, printed and photographed, the cyclical pattern visible at the 4-hour, 17-minute interval, repeating and consistent and unexplained. Below the photographs, a single handwritten line in her precise scientific handwriting. "I am a scientist. These are observations. I do not have an explanation. I am providing the observations because observations without explanation are still observations. The absence of an explanation does not diminish the validity of what was observed." No official response was given to the photographs. No official response was given to the interview. No crew member has entered Module 7 since the evacuation. The International Space Station continues its orbit. Every 90 minutes it completes a circuit of the Earth. On clear nights in the right latitudes, you can see it with the naked eye. A point of light moving steadily across the sky, brighter than most stars, moving with the particular deliberateness of an object traveling at 7.7 kilometers per second. Module 7 is there, in every orbit, in every pass overhead. Its exterior surface catching the sunlight, its interior sealed behind a lock that the current crew does not have the code for. Its records redacted and its communications transcripts edited and its maintenance logs carrying gaps in the shape of something that happened on day 127. Marcus Cole still has the filter. It sits in its glass case on its shelf in its workshop in rural Montana, corroded beyond its years, beyond its operational life, beyond any explanation that has yet been officially offered. 40 years of corrosion on an object that was 6 days old. He looks at it sometimes. He does not claim to understand it. He does not claim to have an explanation. He simply kept the evidence because keeping the evidence was the thing he knew how to do. And he has done it for 11 years, and he will probably keep doing it. Yuki's photographs exist. Reyes's account exists. The gaps in the official record exist in the particular shape of their absence. Something happened on day 127 of that mission. Something that required 11 years of institutional silence and 3 separate debriefs and an unregistered vehicle and unnamed personnel and a sealed hatch and a response time of 4 minutes and 11 seconds to a 6-word message. Something that 3 trained NASA astronauts, professionals with decades of experience, people who have spent their careers in the business of understanding things clearly and reporting them accurately, still cannot explain. The station passes overhead every 90 minutes. Look up sometime. Module 7 is the fourth section from the port solar array. It looks exactly as it always looks. It always has.